The classroom smelled of chalk and polished floors. Sunlight poured through tall windows, cutting sharp lines across the desks. At the very front, on her knees, Emma dragged a mop across the tiles. Her fingers trembled against the wooden handle. A white bucket of water sat beside her, cold and heavy. Behind her, laughter whispered and swelled. Girls in pressed uniforms leaned against their desks, eyes fixed on her. Their navy skirts swung lightly, their red ribbons tied neat and perfect. Emma's uniform looked the same, but on her it never seemed to fit right. Not because of the fabric, but because she wore it like armor, bracing herself against stares that sliced deeper than words. "Look at her," one girl murmured. "She thinks she belongs here," another answered. Emma bit down hard, her jaw tight. She would not give them tears. She pressed the mop harder into the floor, scrubbing a spot already clean. Her story at this school had started months earlier, when she arrived as a transfer student. Nobody knew where she came from. Nobody knew she lived in a small rented room with her aunt, sharing one bed, living on meals of bread and tea. Rumors spread quickly. The richest academy in the city was no place for a girl with nothing, so they made her the target. Every mistake, every silence, every glance became a reason to laugh. Teachers turned their heads, blind to the cruelty. Emma learned to survive by swallowing words, by working harder, by pretending their voices did not reach her. But inside, anger coiled. She knew something no one else did. She was not poor. She was not unwanted. Her late father had built an empire that stretched across industries, an empire worth billions. His sudden death had hidden that truth, and her guardians had kept her away from it all. They told her she had nothing, that her life would remain small, yet Emma carried his last words in her heart. "Never forget who you are." Now, kneeling on the floor, mocked by her classmates, she repeated those words silently. They steadied her breath, sharpened her gaze. The bell rang. The girls left, their laughter echoing down the hall. Emma stayed behind, staring at her reflection in the wet floor. They thought she was powerless. They thought she was weak. But she was a billionaire's daughter. And one day they would all know. Emma rose from the floor, set the mop aside, and wiped her damp hands on her skirt. The empty classroom felt wider now, the silence louder. She picked up her books, stacked neatly on her desk, untouched by anyone else. Nobody ever sat near her. Nobody dared. At lunch, she carried her tray to the far corner of the cafeteria. The room buzzed with chatter and clinking cutlery. She sat alone, spooning rice slowly, pretending not to notice the stares that followed her. A group of girls at the center table burst into laughter, one pointing at her shoes, old and scuffed from years of use. Emma lowered her eyes, hiding the fire burning inside. Suddenly, a voice cut through. "Why do you let them do this to you?" Emma looked up. A boy stood across from her, tall, confident, with a calm expression that unsettled her. His uniform was sharp, his tie perfectly straight. She had seen him before, Daniel Carter, son of the school's board chairman. Popular, untouchable, the kind of person who never noticed people like her. Emma didn't answer. She kept eating. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "You don't talk much," he said. "That's fine. But you should know, not everyone here is against you." Emma met his eyes for the first time. They were steady, curious, not mocking. For a moment, her guard slipped. But before she could speak, a loud voice called from across the cafeteria, "Daniel! Why are you sitting there?" The group of girls had noticed. Their leader, Victoria, strode toward them, her heels clicking against the floor. She was the queen of the class, beautiful, wealthy, cruel. She placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder, glaring at Emma. "You don't belong with her," Victoria said sharply. "She cleans floors. We don't mix with trash." Daniel's expression hardened. He brushed her hand off and stood. "Enough." His voice carried through the cafeteria, silencing the tables around them. "Respect is not about money. It's about character. And you've just shown everyone you have none." Gasps filled the room. Victoria's face burned red. She turned and stormed out, her followers trailing behind her. Emma sat frozen. No one had ever defended her like that. She gripped the edge of the table, her heart racing. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. And that small shift was only the beginning. After lunch, whispers followed Emma through the hallways. Students who once ignored her now turned their heads, curious, unsettled by what they had witnessed. Daniel Carter had stood up for her, and that meant something. His family's name carried weight. His word held power. Emma tried to steady herself, but her chest felt tight. She didn't want attention, not this way. Yet part of her knew the balance had shifted. The walls closing in on her every day had begun to crack. When the final bell rang, she gathered her books quickly and left the classroom before anyone could speak to her. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the courtyard in gold. She walked toward the gate, but footsteps trailed behind. "Emma, wait." Daniel caught up to her, slightly out of breath. He carried his bag casually over one shoulder. "I didn't mean to embarrass you earlier, but someone had to say it." Emma tightened her grip on her books. "You don't know me," she said softly. "No," he admitted, "but I want to." The sincerity in his tone made her uneasy. She had learned not to trust kindness. It usually came with strings attached. Still, something about his steady gaze held her there. Before she could answer, a sharp voice cut across the courtyard. "Daniel!" Victoria stood near the gate, arms crossed, fury flashing in her eyes. Behind her, two girls whispered, waiting for drama to unfold. "Don't waste your time on her," Victoria snapped. "She's nothing. You're only making yourself look foolish." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Stop, Victoria. You don't decide who matters." Emma's pulse quickened. The confrontation drew the attention of students lingering nearby. Phones appeared, recording. Victoria's reputation cracked under the weight of Daniel's defiance, and she knew it. "You'll regret this," Victoria hissed, her voice trembling with anger. "Both of you!" She turned sharply and stormed off, the sound of her heels echoing against the stone path. Silence hung in the air. Emma exhaled slowly, her hands shaking. Daniel glanced at her.
"She'll try to make things harder for you now."
"Be ready." Emma nodded, though her mind was already racing. Harder didn't scare her anymore.
She had faced worse, alone.
But now she wasn't alone. As they walked out of the gate together, Emma realized something had shifted inside her. She no longer felt like the girl forced to kneel on classroom floors. She was rising, and soon her truth would rise with her. The next morning, the atmosphere in class felt different. Students glanced at Emma when she entered, no longer with mocking smirks, but with uncertain curiosity. Daniel's words still echoed across the campus, whispered in every hallway. Even teachers seemed more cautious, avoiding the kind of dismissive looks they once gave her. But Victoria had not forgotten. She never forgave humiliation. When Emma took her seat, she found her desk covered in ink. Cruel words scrawled across the surface. Beggar. Trash. Nobody. The class snickered under their breath, waiting for her to break. Emma stood still for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then, without a word, she opened her notebook, placed it over the scribbles, and began to write. The silence was heavier than laughter, her refusal to react sharper than any insult. Victoria's eyes narrowed from the back row. Rage simmered beneath her perfect smile. At lunch, the confrontation escalated. Victoria cornered Emma near the cafeteria doors, her followers forming a wall behind her. "Listen," Victoria spat. "I don't care what Daniel said yesterday. You're nothing, and you'll stay nothing. If you think his little speech changes that, you're delusional." Emma met her glare calmly. For months she had stayed quiet, absorbing cruelty like a sponge. But today, something inside her broke free. "You think respect is something you can steal with money and fear," Emma said, her voice low but steady. "But it's not. Respect is earned, and I don't need to prove anything to you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria's smile faltered. Nobody had ever spoken back to her like that. Before she could respond, a figure stepped forward from the entrance. An older man in a tailored suit, flanked by two assistants, walked through the hallway with authority. His presence silenced the entire cafeteria. "Emma," he called, his voice firm but warm. Every head turned. Emma froze. She knew that voice. She had heard it in hushed phone calls with lawyers, in stories whispered by her aunt. The man stopped in front of her, his gaze softening. "You've grown," he said. "I am your father's oldest friend." The board has reached a decision. His estate belongs to you. It's time the world knows who you are. The words crashed over the room like thunder. Whispers turned to shock. Disbelief spreading across every face. Emma's chest tightened. For years she had carried her secret in silence, a hidden weight pressing her down. Now it was revealed not by her, but by someone who could no longer let her be treated as less. Victoria's face drained of color. The group behind her scattered, unable to hide their shame. Daniel stepped closer, his expression unreadable, then quietly nodded at Emma. It was not surprise he carried, but recognition. He had sensed there was more to her. Now he knew. Emma stood tall, her voice steady. "I never wanted your approval," she said, her eyes locking with Victoria's. "But now you know the truth. And it changes nothing about who I am. I will still fight for my place, not because of my father's name, but because I choose not to be broken." The room remained silent. Students who had once mocked her now stared with respect they couldn't disguise. Emma walked past them, out into the open air, her steps light, her chest unburdened. For the first time, she felt free, not because of wealth, but because she had found her strength. The heiress of a billion-dollar empire had been hidden in plain sight. The bullied girl on her knees had risen, not to seek revenge, but to claim her place with dignity. Her story was no longer about survival. It was about becoming unstoppable.